Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's another episode of Let's Talk Broncos, but it's a Thursday edition. Frankie, some may even say the best edition of Let's Talk Broncos.
Ow!
I hate throwing that out there, but I'm just talking about what some say. Some do say the best edition, Frankie. They really do. Um, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great. We're into the 2024. I'll be honest. I'm a little bit feeling that after effect. There's about to be playoff football, but there's not Broncos football. I did my final, I watched the final Broncos game of the year rewatch on through some film last night, and it's a little bit sad, but I'm also very excited. We're getting into draft season. I know you just got your Mobile credentials and you're super hyped to get out there, so that's going to be incredible. You're going to be creating so much awesome content. Can't wait to see all that stuff, but really just excited for the new year to get going. A lot of good stuff we're going to be creating over the next, however many months. And yeah, how are you doing, Joey? How has your start of this new era been? New era.
Shout out to Zach Seegers for being in the chat. Shout out to Paul for being in the chat. Shout out to everybody. I love you guys to death. Dude, Frankie, I am so excited. I won't lie. This is kind of like where I feel like I thrive. I really do. If people make fun of me on Twitter for it sometimes, I don't care. I love this type of stuff. I love the team building aspect of the sport. This is where feel like, I don't know. This is where you go into kid mode talking about I just started a franchise mode in Madden. And that's what I'm on right now. I am really jacked up about going to the Senior Bowl this year. I have a tweet in 2021 when I first started talking about I'm going to the Senior Bowl next year. A little late, but I am going. So it's going to be super fun, kind of a dream of mine. So that'll be really good. And I'm feeling jacked up for this offseason, man. We have Sean Payton as the head coach. And my whole thing when the Broncos hired Sean Payton was I want to see them build this team in his vision. That's what I want to see. Sean Payton, they traded a first-round pick for him. Why did they throw a first-round pick for him? Well, let's see it. That's kind of what we're here for, right? And this is the first offseason of it. Last year we got a little taste, I think. He made some moves, and we're going to get into how those moves went later in this episode. But yeah, it's good. I'm jacked up, Frankie. Really am.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I think that what's even more exciting about it, even though the way they got there might not be exciting, is they have the 12th pick. They're in range in theory. If they wanted to try to make a big swing, go up there, try to get one of these top quarterbacks, I think they are I think that is a possibility. I don't know how likely it is, but I mean, if they wanted to say bundle the 12th pick, throw a third this year and next year's one and another two and try to get into like the top 8 range and see if someone slips that they really like, I think it's possible. So I completely agree. I think that this year's super exciting. I think what you said about Sean Payton truly being like the driver of the bus, it seems like the ownership trusts him, what for better or for worse, depending upon how people feel about that. I think it's exciting that kind of the team is behind one guy. It doesn't feel like there's multiple visions colliding. There's one vision. Sean Payton is making the executive decisions. I think, feel how you will about the Russell Wilson decision. That's a leader type move. We're willing to move off that. We're not going to be, I don't want to say tricked, but we're not going to buy into maybe the season that we just had. That was maybe a bit of a mirage. And that's not me calling Russ's season a mirage, but I'd say maybe we can be a true contending team. Let's not super hard buy into that. And let me truly be Sean Payton and build this thing from the ground up. I'm very excited about it. So yeah, if we're trying to dive into it, I mean,
Let's get into it.
Yeah.
I want to get to you first, Frankie. Let's just get screw all the news. We're in the off season now. This is the first episode of us talking about the off season. Let's get into the off season, man. Or let's get into, because we're evaluating how Sean Payton did and how that's exciting carrying over, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about what he did with his coaching staff. How would you evaluate Sean Payton himself? I don't want to include the additions and stuff, but him as a coach, a play caller, all of that encompass it. How would you evaluate him?
I think Sean Payton has been very good this year. I may be hesitant to call him elite or great yet, but I think he has been very good so far. I think he is definitely on an upward trend right now. I like a lot of the moves he made with the staff. I think a lot of, again, the executive decisions he made this year, while some might be a little volatile and some might be disliked, I think a lot of them kind of paid dividends. I think the decisions to kind of move off of Randy Gregory and Frank Clark, I think the decision to, at the end of the day, see what you had in Jarrett Stidham behind Russell Wilson so you have a better idea going into this offseason. I think, I think what we saw with the kind of steps forward from, I'd say the staff hires he did, because I think those are kind of the things that directly improve the special teams. You talk about, I think, the offensive line improvements, not only from a lot of the signings they made, but I think Zach Strief, the offensive line coach he brought in, did a really good job. I think Sean Payton this year, I'd give him for a grade probably like a B+. I think he has been a good head coach so far. I have a very hard time kind of saying otherwise. Have there been kind of some moments that kind of leave you a little bit like, is that maybe the best way to handle it? No. There were some questionable clock management decisions, I'd say once or twice throughout the year. Right. But I'd say on the whole, this was a team that was organized most of the time. I'd say this was a team that played hard every single week. This was a team that was in a lot of games and beat some really good teams that I don't think any of us at the beginning of the year thought that they would be able to do. Like, I think that the arrow is 100% pointing up from Sean Payton. This is a team that learned throughout the year, I'd say, better how to win games and how to not lose games for themselves. And I think that's important. Yes, there have still been some trips along the way, but I'd say they're better at those things now than they have been at the end of any other season under another coach. What are your thoughts?
1,000%. And you know what? Some of those clock management, what is the game I'm thinking of where the timeouts? It was like 2 weeks ago. I
think it was the Pats game.
The Pats game, yeah. That's one of those situations where it's like, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Right. If it works out, everyone's going to call you a genius. If you don't, everyone's going to call you an idiot.
Just that one against the Raiders last week.
Exactly. Yeah. It's one of those, to me. Like, I'm not going to kill a coach for making that decision, because it really is just like luck involved in that. You're betting on your defense or you're not. Like, there's certain things that go involved into that decision that I don't think people on Twitter are very verified to make,
Yeah. No,
And no, I'm not saying, I'm not putting that on you at all, Frankie. I just, it was one of those things where I'm just like watching the things where it's like, yes, at the end of the day, I do have to call it clock management issues there, because it didn't work out, and that's how a lot of this coaching situation, coaching thing is evaluated. Like, everyone wants to rip Vic Fangio without a quarterback, or that's all these coaches. If you don't have a quarterback, chances are you're going to get fired in the NFL. That's really just how it is. So yeah, it's one of those situations. And I mean, at the end of the day, I'm sitting here evaluating the team, and if you had told me fresh off the Nathaniel Hackett situation and everything that happened there, that the Broncos would improve their record that much, I mean, I felt lost after that. I feel a lot more hyped going into this offseason than I did last. I knew a lot of changes were coming last offseason, but the Broncos kind of felt lost in identity. That's something I don't really feel this year with Sean Payton at helm. I think the Broncos kind of have a direction. Where they choose to go is still, that's up in the air, especially at quarterback. But it's not just where are the Broncos going just generally. And that's something that I felt last offseason compared to this season. We beat the Chiefs. Everyone at the beginning of the year was talking about the Broncos can win one game, and if it's against the Chiefs, I'd be happy. Obviously that wasn't true, and I wouldn't have said that at the time either. But overall, I think Sean Payton did a pretty good job. I thought he did what he could do with Russell Wilson without getting too far outside of why we hired Sean Payton as the play caller. I thought he evolved his offense plenty. Maybe not all the way to Russell Wilson's likings, but trying to pair his offense with what Russell Wilson does really well. And I overall thought it was a pretty good season from Sean Payton in general.
Yeah. No, and I mean, we'll get into the rest of the staff. I'd also say a big thing I like about Sean for this next phase of Broncos football, when we talk about this team maybe having to be a little light on high capital talent, if that makes sense. Like, they're not going to have a ton of extra first round picks over the next couple of years. They're not going to have a lot of big money, as George Payton mentioned, to spend in free agency this year. I trust George Payton and a lot of we'll get to talk about some of these associate coaches he's brought on and these positional coaches. Like, I trust these guys to kind of develop and maybe find some of these gems in the rough in some of these later round guys. I think we saw this year kind of some of these guys that maybe I don't want to say had been forgotten about, but a lot of these guys that truly took a step forward from previous regimes that hadn't really kind of gotten to be that guy yet. You think about how good Lloyd looked this year, how good, I'd say Judy got to do a little bit of some different things this year. I'd say just a lot of the different pieces, I'd say, got to grow under this coaching staff. And I think that's something that we're going to see going forward. And again, like I just said, having that flexibility for when I think this team is going to have to go a little bit younger in the next couple of years is a big plus, because I trust guys I'm pretty confident in Zach Strief right now as an offensive line coach. Robbie was pointing out some great clips from Kiri Colbert, who's the wide receiver coach from USC, who's a guy I'm kind of getting more and more confidence in to kind of build up this receiver room, especially when we look at the great receivers in this class. I like what Davis Webb did a lot this year as a quarterback coach anytime I'd see him on the sideline. So I'm feeling pretty decent about this staff's ability as a whole to kind of develop a next young generation of Broncos. I don't know if you feel the same way. And then you get to the defensive side of the ball with Christian Parker if he doesn't go anywhere.
No, 1,000%. 1,000%. Let's move straight into that, Frankie. Let's go Vance Joseph first, though, and then we can hit on Christian Parker after that. How would you evaluate Vance Joseph's season? Obviously off to a rough start, but the Broncos defense did seem to improve at a point. Largely, some people would credit turnovers to that, but I think Vance Joseph was instrumental in his ability to, he has crazy pressure packages and stuff like that he was throwing out there more towards the end than he did at the beginning. And I thought that was a major improvement for him. How would you evaluate Vance Joseph, though?
Yeah, I think Vance, I'd say probably a little lower of a grade than I'd give Sean. But again, you kind of talk about, I'd say they spent a lot more heavily on the offense than the defense their caps is a lot more spent on the offensive side of the ball. So I'd say Vance probably gets a B-, but like you said, kind of, I think the big swing we saw in the middle to late middle of the season kind of bought him another year.
Yeah.
Vance is tough. I have a tough time because he was put in a very hard situation, and then he eventually made some changes, I'd say around week 5 or 6, around after the Dolphins game. Obviously, you have to. Both personnel-wise, I'd say schematically, he got to run a lot more of the Vance Joseph flavor, if you will. They were kind of blitzing at a lot higher of a rate after that. They were kind of forcing the issue a lot more on offenses, which I like to see a lot more. But I guess here's the thing. I think Vance Joseph has definitely earned another year. I guess, wonder if there's the chance next year Vance Joseph, if he does get another year, leads another, 18th to 20th ranked defense. And we're kind of sitting here saying, should they have kind of moved on? Because I like Vance. I think Vance did a good job this year. Again, I think the midseason turnaround was great. But I do think that there were still a lot of core issues on the defense. And while I do think a lot of those were talent-related issues, I do also kind of recognize, there were a lot of underlying metrics of this defense that just don't look good, and it's kind of hard to be like, oh, this guy just automatically gets another year because for 5 weeks they were able to create a lot of turnovers, which, yes, Vance was doing a great job of, and they continued to do throughout the year, like I mentioned, with the lack of talent. But, it's just one of those things where I've been kind of thinking more and more I do think Vance earned another year, but I do almost get a gut feeling I think they might end up regretting it if, again, we get to week 8 next year and this is another bottom third of the league defense, which I don't know if, that's what it will be.
No, it's an interesting point. Frankie, something that stands out to me that you told me halfway through the season, and I was like, damn, Frankie is so right on this point, was Sean Payton's ability to use these role players on offense and maximize that role to its star potential. With Lil Jordan Humphrey and Samaje Perine and Chris Manhertz and these other guys where, I've seen these type of players on other Broncos coaching staffs. I just haven't seen them play as good in them because their role isn't doing what they do best so much.
Yeah.
Where that's something that I want to see from Vance Joseph this offseason because, like you said, the Broncos aren't going to have a ton of draft capital. One, they don't have a crazy amount of draft capital just to throw at defense. And then secondly, they don't have money to spend. They don't have the A-list free agents to go after. Like you said, George Payton, you already mentioned that. They're not going to do that. So it's going to be imperative for Vance Joseph to evaluate talent, and we're going to be able to check out how he is as an evaluator. And that is honestly something I've questioned. I've seen his draft picks in Arizona, and quite frankly, not that great. And he like I saw Isaiah Simmons go from the Cardinals where he couldn't get playing time to the Giants where he had his best season under Wink Martindale.
Hassan Reddick.
There you go.
Mean, there's a lot of that was another point I was going to make. There are a lot of examples where like I'm excited for Vance, but there are a little like, ooh. I was talking with Joe Rouse about this. We were talking about Riley Moss actually, and it's kind of a different thing. But I was like, man, we were talking about how he's heard that Moss is probably not a fit at safety, and I've said how much I've liked him at outside corner in Vance's type of scheme. But it's kind of like I'm also sitting here like, man, Vance has kind of struggled with these hybrid-ish players in the past, and Riley Moss right now, I'd say like I don't think they really know where they want to put him right now. Like they only played him really as like a dime corner or sometimes as a dime linebacker. Like I don't know if we saw any true outside snaps from him outside of if there was like a motion he followed the guy. Like, I don't think we really saw any snap. Like, I don't think we really saw Riley Moss used in the way I think you would expect a pick like him. I'd feel almost a little similar about Drew Sanders, where towards the end of the year, it felt like they were just like, you're an edge now. And I kind of wanted to be like, okay, like that's all right.
Hated that.
I hated that so much. I didn't understand. And I believe me, I get the idea of like you want to flex him around and try some things, but it felt like they really just kind of stuck him there for the final 6 weeks. And I wanted to be like, what? Because I don't think, at least from my view, maybe you felt differently. That didn't really move me at all. I did not get a lot of flashes of like, wow, Drew Sanders. It wasn't Baron Brown at edge.
Linebacker. I liked him more at inside linebacker coming out of the draft, and I've ended the season still liking him a lot more at inside linebacker than I do edge. He just has more translatable traits to me at inside linebacker than he does edge. When I'm looking at what's easy to get better at, like the traits that I think he needs to develop at inside linebacker are a lot easier than what he needs to do at edge, in my opinion. I just don't see it. Like if I'm talking about a player that I think needs to put on play strength, moving him closer to the line of scrimmage is something that I'm not doing.
Yes.
I'm not doing that.
Another thing I'd say too that frustrates me so much is like, one of Drew Sanders' best traits coming out was his ability to, I'd say, rush over guards and over centers, because his lateral quickness is very good. And I mean, he does have the length to be able to create issues for a lot of those interior guys that are a little bit, a little stumpier on the arms compared to tackles who have the length to deal with him. That, like, considering how much the Broncos love to blitz the interior, they send so many double A-gap pressures with Alex Singleton and Josie, who are great at that. But it's like, you have another guy who you just spent a very high pick, or not a very high, but like a pretty high pick on. Try him there a little more than I ever saw. Like, we're using Nick Bonito as an over center pass rusher a ton, which I liked. Give Drew Sanders some reps there. Don't just keep him on the edge, whatever.
Yeah, you can use them both, but you should use Drew Sanders in that role and Nick Bonito over the edge, I feel. Like, if you're going to throw that out there, you're totally right.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to make this the, like, bash Vance Joseph, but, like, there's been, like, we didn't see a lot. J.L. Skinner was another guy I was a little bit like, man, I would have liked to see a little bit more of him throughout the year. It was a little concerning to me that, like, this is one thing that has blown my mind, I guess, for 2 years. I mean, this even counts for Evro last year, and this, I guess, involves Christian Parker a little bit as well. How was Jaquan McMillian not starting, like, all year? Like, he was on the team last year and was starting at the end of the year and looked pretty good at the end of last offseason. We heard multiple reporters come out in training camp being like, Jaquan McMillian looks good again. He didn't play until week 6, and then they played him, and he's he's damn near a Pro Bowl nickel, in my opinion.
Yeah, like, you're totally right, Frankie. And not only that, you started a guy you ended up cutting over.
You started Isang Bassi, who has just point blank been one of the worst defenders in the league this year. Like, there's really no way. I'm not even trying to beat up on him.
You cut him. The week you decided to start McMillian was the week you decided to cut Isang Bassi. I just don't understand what went through in that decision.
This team was starting Jonathan Harris over Mike Purcell for like 6 weeks. And it's those things where I'm like, and again, he eventually corrected, but it took
the talent evaluation pieces.
It took a 70-point ass whooping, and it sounds like a talking to, because like I think Sean said after the week, he was like, like we sat down and we had discussed this. Like, you can't have 70 points and record-breaking yards getting dropped on you, brother. You got to make some changes. And then Vance came out and changed out 5 of the starters. And it just little things like that where I'm sitting here, I'm a little hesitant about the idea of trusting. Not trust, because again, I think he's earned the year, but of trusting Vance with kind of the rebuilding of this defense, because I think they're another side of the ball that's I think gonna have to get younger.
Okay, last Vance point here. I really don't trust him with these like hybrid players either, and he loves them to death.
Yeah, he keeps drafting them.
He drafts them.
So what are you doing, dude?
Single year. Drew Sanders is in the same vein as his Isaiah Simmons, kind of opposite. Not safety linebacker, but linebacker
inside outside, right?
Closer to Zaven Collins, who was drafted kind of an inside linebacker, and now they kind of have him playing edge, and it just they have like these weird ideas that aren't really working. I don't know. It feels like the idea that Vance likes doesn't actually ever pan out, especially with his players he drafts. Let's move on, though. I don't want to crap on Vance because I do think overall, what would you give his letter grade? I'm going to give it like
B
a C.
See? I'm going like a B. You know what? Yeah, I'll go C plus. C, like a 78% on a quiz.
Yeah. And I'm to be determined for the future. I'm giving him a C because I'm so TBD.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what's going on there.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the offensive staff, though. This is a guy that I think is going to get a higher grade from me, and that is offensive line coach Zach Strief. I think he had a really great year. I think people forget, Frankie, that Garrett Bowles is coming off a broken leg, and last year, honestly, didn't look that great. Now this year, he comes in, and he's – even in his best years, he's been super inconsistent. He was still inconsistent some this year, but I thought it was his overall most consistent year at, okay, I'm either getting good to average play. So Zach Strief credit there. Lloyd Cushenberry, give him credit there. These are improvements made across the offensive line. Even guys like Quinn Bailey, who comes in and helps. I like all this type of stuff. So yeah, would you do with Zach Strief?
Yeah, I'd give Zach Strief like a solid B plus, maybe A minus. He seems like he's done a good job. I think the biggest crowning jewel of his right now. Not that Lloyd obviously deserves a ton of credit as well. This is the third year in his career. He's obviously made a ton of progression up until this point, but we've seen him jump to being a top 5, top 8, top 10 center this year. I think you have to credit the offensive line coach with that. I think the protection plans have been sound all year long. I just think that we've seen a pretty good unit. I remember back in the preseason, anytime when they'd get to the second string, third string offensive line, for anyone who watches preseason games all the way through like I do, you're an absolute sicko. But you usually know once you get to that third string, fourth string tackle, it gets a little ugly out there. But the Broncos did not have that issue. We saw Palczewski look solid. We saw Bird, I remember, look solid. I think Forsythe had some decent reps. When Wattenberg had to come in and play a little bit, he looked okay. Like, I'm feeling pretty good right now, especially when you talk about, I'd say maybe top 5 most valuable coaching positions, maybe top 3 on your staff is your offensive line coach. I'm feeling pretty good right now about Zach Strief. I think we've seen him. He was really well liked in New Orleans, and I think throughout his first year in Denver, he's been well liked, and we've seen good results. And I think when you talk about, I guess I'm going to say this for a lot of position groups, another group in Denver, I think that's probably going to get a little younger next year. You know, we don't know if Lloyd's going to be back. I think he's going to probably demand a pretty decently big contract on free agency. I don't know if Denver's going to be able to live up to that. And I mean, as we'll discuss, I'm not sure if that's the worst thing in the world.
I thought you made really good points on your Full Field Read podcast with Robbie about that. I thought you made a really, really solid point. I'd like for you to expand on that with Lloyd. Yeah. If the Broncos do miss out on Lloyd Cushenberry because they can't pay him that money,
sure,
he's made those great improvements, but why could that end up being a positive, Frankie?
So I'll dive into this now. So the Broncos run game all year has been an issue, and this is me trying to pin it on Lloyd, but the Broncos run game all year has, I'd say, underwhelming, and I'd say throughout the last 5 weeks of this, or maybe throughout the last half of the season, was straight up one of the bottom 5-10 units in the NFL. It was very not good. And I think a big issue with that is they have a lot of guys right now on this offensive line that I think are more suited to play one type of running style, whether that be more zone or more gap, which zone you're using more better linemen that can move a little bit. You're not using as much of these bulkier guys that can handle these one-on-one blocks. You're more having guys that can get to the second level that can kind of move around a little bit, exactly like I said. Whereas in gap, I think you want to have more of the Ben Powers, Quinn Miners type of guys that can truly yes, they can move as well, but these guys are also hammers. You know, these guys can fly around the corner and knock you on your ass, or they can pin down a 300-pound defensive lineman and let another guy move. Something that I think has been a little bit of an issue for the Broncos running game this year is under Sean Payton, you're going to be doing everything. And I mean, that's going to be a fun thing for us to get into scouting this year for a lot of these guys. you need smart players and you need guys that are versatile. Like you're not going to have just one guy doing one thing the whole game. They run a lot of different stuff, especially in the running game where they've shown every game they're showing so many different concepts to their running game. And I think something that they weren't able to do as much of this year as I think they would have liked to is run a lot more of just generic like pin pull concepts with their center, because while Lloyd is incredible and he's really good on zone reads, zone concepts, he's really good at getting to the second level. He flies off the ball. Lloyd is really good at the stuff, and he's really good in the pass game. He would be great in a Shanahan type scheme.
Yeah.
But Sean likes to run a lot of this gap stuff where you need your center to be able to step over, pin down that 300 plus pound nose or the one tech, while Ben Powers tries to glide behind him and pop the guy on the end. Sadly, Lloyd just isn't built really like that, so he can't pin that guy. So usually Lloyd's getting knocked back. He's running to the puller, and then Javante's walking up to there's no lane because the center's being knocked. It's getting pinched. Now Javante has to bounce out. Whole run game doesn't work. So that's an area where I think you could see possibly the run game improve in some areas. Again, this is not me trying to say that they are going to be able to upgrade at center next year. I don't think that is the case. But I think that's an area where you could see the run game maybe improve a little bit with a different type of center put in.
Yeah, it's a great example of why scheme matters for players. Why in the draft we look so heavily at what scheme we want these guys to be in, right? Because to play to their strengths, certain things need to happen. They'll look bad if they're not thrown in the right system. And you kind of saw that sometimes with Cushenberry. You pinpointed it perfect. His play strength is just not that great. That's really what it is. And I do agree with you. In other offenses, I think he could even look better than what he looked in Denver. I really do. I think if you just did what Lloyd does best consistently, he could look even better. I thought that was a really solid point you made on Full Field Read. Frankie, let's move into the next coach here and the last coach. We're already 30 minutes in. I hope you guys are enjoying this content, by the way. If you guys like this, please leave a like on the YouTube as well. Please, please, please. Christian Parker is the defensive coach I want to highlight. I thought he was terrific. What do you say, Frankie?
Yeah, Christian Parker, I think another good year. I will say, and I mean, this isn't really a fault on him, I do wish we got to see a little more of the young guys. At least in like the cornerback room, I guess I'm just talking about like Riley Moss and JL Skinner. But I mean, I think he did a great job. I think the secondary was sound most of the time. I don't really put too much of the tackling issues on him. A lot of the kind of later season issues with, Fabian Moreau getting torched a little bit, again, don't really put on him. I think we didn't see the step forward we'd like to see out of Damari Mathis. Again, I don't know if that's necessarily something I want to put on Christian Parker. But again, we continue to see strides out of Patrick Surtain. I'm going to keep saying it. Jaquan McMillian looks like a Pro Bowl nickel corner. Every time I rewatch the Broncos defense, I come away like, wow, they do not need a nickel corner. The Broncos have a true, and they have him on a great contract.
They have him forever.
3 to 4 years. They have a good nickel corner. I have no concerns both in the run game and the pass game. He's smart. He communicates incredibly well. He's a leader in that defense. I really like that guy. I have very little issues with him. So, I think Simmons had another good year. I think, once you saw K-Jack go out and you saw PJ Locke come in, I think they were more of a, I don't know how to say this, more of a hive mind secondary. You saw them, I think, kind of playing together and a little bit faster, especially coming downhill and kind of blowing up plays when they were playing just a lot of soft zone or drop 8 and just being able to come up and lay hits into guys. So, yeah, I think Christian Parker is another guy that, we say this every single year, probably going to become a defensive coordinator soon, but he might be another one of those guys, and this isn't a bad thing whatsoever, who's just best suited at doing what he does best, which might be coaching up DBs. And you can make plenty of money doing that. So don't, keep doing what you're doing best, Christian.
Yes, I need him on this podcast. We've hit him up a few times. We need him on Let's Talk Broncos. Christian Parker, if you're listening, you've listened to a few shows. Please come on the pod, man. It would be.
He'd probably have some great. He's been on so many coaching staffs, and he's gone to being on the defense of these teams the last 5 years. We're they've had playoff caliber defenses. Not trying to beat up, but I think it's pretty obvious. The defense of the last 5 years for the Broncos has not been the problem. So getting to talk to the dude who's been Yeah, dude, I'm putting out pretty good secondaries. I can't lie. And this team goes like 4-12 every year. Like, what the
fuck? You mentioned the corners. We didn't even mention the safeties and everything that happened there with Kareem in and out of the lineup.
Yeah.
Kane Stearns being hurt. What happens?
Seems
TJ Watt, another friend of the show, comes in and he plays really, really well. I think that he does a really good job developing these players. Fabian Moreau, I can't really knock him for, to your point, Frankie, because they signed him off the street in season, and then next thing you know, he's your starting corner. And what am I supposed to do with that?
Let me go on a little tangent right here. What you just said right there is exactly why I don't think the Broncos need to make a huge swing at cornerback too. Guys, Fabian Moreau came off the street for like a vet min contract. Like, I'm not saying don't upgrade off him, sure, but like, get a $4 million corner, get a 3-year, $15 million corner. You don't got to spend you don't need to get Kool-Aid McKinstry with the 12th overall pick to play next to Patrick Surtain, I guess, but like that just I feel like there's a lot of people that look at Fabian Moreau not playing great and they're like, oh, Denver really needs a CB2, and it's like, yes, I agree. They need a CB2, but they don't need a great CB2. I don't think they need to make this massive swing at cornerback too, because as we've said, they have one of the best corner. They have the best. I'm just gonna say it. They have the best corner in the NFL at CB1. I see it every single week.
They do. I think
they have a well above average nickel, in my opinion, maybe just above average. So I think you can upgrade from your vet minimum walking on the street in the middle of August corner without having to be like, well, now we need to spend $10 million a season or a top 15 draft pick on a corner. Like, there is some gray area there where you can work and upgrade without it being like a massive investment. That was my tangent.
Yeah, I agree. Christian Parker, again, if you're listening to this, I bet you he disagrees. He wants the Broncos to make the biggest splash on cornerback ever.
Get Nate Wiggins.
Yeah, right. And who knows, Damari Mathis, maybe he comes in better next year. He did show some as a rookie. I hope that he does come in and show.
And I guess that's the other part too. If we trust Parker so much, we have to believe then. I mean, it's not like they haven't invested in the secondary over the last few years. I've pointed out many times, George Payton loves drafting DBs. It is his favorite thing. He's drafted like 9. It's like he might be in double digits DBs drafted in 3 years. And I don't think many of them have played.
What was the safety, Frankie, that he drafted that was like super rangy over the top but could not tackle? He was from Indiana.
Oh God.
Do you know what I'm talking about? He was his ball skills were insane, but the kid could not tackle. It drove me insane.
I have to Google this now.
I thought that guy was a perfect example of like, George, we need.
Oh, Jamar Johnson. I mean, that same year they took. I mean, like you can go down the list. They have taken
that year was insane.
A lot of corners and safety.
Why was that year?
Like it's one thing that's always frustrated me with like. Again, and this is something that like if they're gonna take a step back next year, I would like to see some of these guys. They have drafted how many safeties in the last 3 years, and every year they're like, just bring Kareem back. He'll just start. And it's like, dude, like you have like 4 year 1 or year 2 safety. Just try one of them. I get they might not be good, but like you'll look at like again. I'm gonna look at the Rams and the Packers this year. They found so much gold because they were like, we might as well see what we have in these UDFAs and day 3 picks we drafted over the last couple of years. And they found so much gold. That's what I want for Denver next year.
Well, all right. Let's move on to the players here, Frankie. I do agree with you. I think these evaluations have been kind of crazy. And they've been drafting all the DBs late, too. That's something I do have to say. Like, they keep taking shots at DB, but they keep taking them in, like, the 6th and 7th round. Outside of Riley Moss. Please, Riley Moss, I want to see you on the field.
That's true. And Damari was a 4th, but that is true.
Yeah, Damari was a 4th. Let's move on to the players, though. Let's start with free agent signings. We're already 34 minutes in. We've been talking about coaches this whole time. It's a fun conversation, though.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, if you guys enjoy this podcast, give it a like. Mike McGlinchey was the first free agent addition I want to highlight here. I think we go through 2. Here's what I'm going to do on offense. 1 on offense, 1 on defense, and we'll go rookie class. What did you make of Mike McGlinchey's season? I know you were kind of a skeptic going into it. You were one of the first people I saw be like, Mike McGlinchey isn't as good as you people think. So I would say ultimately you were right, but give me your thoughts, Frankie.
Pretty much what I expected. I mean, Mike McGlinchey, poor in pass pro. I mean, there's not like it wasn't going to be a surprise when it came out. When week 1 happened against Max Crosby, I was like, this is going to be a bit of a rough year. But to his, like, I also think he gets a bit more dumped on than he should because of the contract. And like, while that's fair, we talk about this all the time. You are just going to overpay for top of the market guys in free agency. And while McGlinchey does frustrate me, he is at least like an average tackle. Like, he's fine. He has some pros to his game. While he might have some gaffes in the pass pro, he does move really well in the run game, and he does do some good things. So I'd say the signing overall is probably like a C minus to me, just because of how much money they had to end up paying him. But like, I don't know. It's tough. I mean, I don't know. It was always set up to kind of be poor for him because they were signing an average tackle, and everyone knew, like, again, I'm not trying to beat up on Mike McGlinchey. He's never had a season that's truly like, oh man, this is like a top 5 tackle. I don't think even he'd really disagree with that. So they went out and paid that guy top like 3 money. And it's just like, yeah, dude, like that recipe is just always going to result in disappointment. But like, I guess at the very least, it wasn't like a catastrophe, I'd say. You know, it's not like this guy came out and just like destroyed his leg in the first like week. I don't think he was like unplayably bad, you know? Like, I think it was kind of what it was. They needed to make a signing at tackle. They sadly overpaid a little bit, but that's what you're going to do in free agency. You live with it and you move on, I think. So that's kind of where I'm at with it being a C. I don't think it's like a fail, but I think it's what it is.
Yeah, there were like 2 sides of it, right? Because everyone was like, there were, and you nailed it. I want to say that too while I'm on here. Frankie nails his evaluations a lot of the time. The guy knows what he's looking at. Mike McGlinchey was a great example of that. To those people that tweet hunt old tweets, it's funny how they never pull up the stuff you were right on, and I have a good memory. So I'm going to be the one that says it. Frankie nailed that. He had that down from the moment, or it wasn't even the moment they signed him, because he was on it before the Broncos signed it. There, he was talking about, I really don't know about this Mike McGlinchey guy as a pass blocker. He gave great examples as to why. George Kittle was over there helping a ton. They had Trent Williams on the other side. Why do I ever need to help Trent Williams? I'll throw all the help on the other side towards Mike McGlinchey. And yeah, ultimately, Frankie nailed it. The other part about this is this really was a fail on drafting and developing offensive linemen, because when you go into free agency and try to sign a starter at offensive tackle, you're going to overpay. When you go out there and get average at tackle, you're paying them a ton. There's no such thing as signing, oh, he's a good tackle for cheap. That's non-existent. Doesn't happen in that.
Look at Taylor for the Chiefs this year. He's the same way.
Exactly. 1,000%. So when you go out there and you do that, you're going to have to expect to overpay. And Mike McGlinchey is an overpaid offensive tackle. The Broncos have really struggles in pass protection. Hopefully the Broncos are able to give him help over there. But
I guess
a pretty good run blocker, I think, in scenarios. I also think he struggles there sometimes, but he really does have his strengths as a run blocker. He has strengths that where it's like, wow, in that trait, you might be top 3.
I mean, I think there were a couple runs the past couple weeks. I pointed one out on the full field read with Robbie, where I was like, man, these runs are almost like designed that you need a Mike McGlinchey. You need your tackle to be able to get onto that second. I mean, when they run their zone stuff, like I was one of those people, I think, before the year that was probably like, you could just have Cam Fleming do what Mike McGlinchey did. I watched Cam Fleming these past couple weeks. I was wrong. Like, Cam Fleming cannot do what Mike McGlinchey did. Cam Fleming struggled in the run game very mightily. You know, he can do a little bit. He can down block a little bit, but he's not a mover. And he struggled in pass pro. He was getting, like, for all the heck I give Mike McGlinchey about struggling against Max Crosby, oh my God, it was a nightmare. So it's just kind of like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't in that situation. Like you said, they did not have a developed option that they were willing to trust, unless you want to throw Palczewski out there or you want to throw Cam Fleming.
You're 1,000% right. I was saying when I was evaluating Mike McGlinchey, and it was later than you, Frankie, but after the Broncos had signed him, I really sat down and watched the film on him. I was like, oh, I totally understand why this guy was a first round pick because the traits are insane. Like he can move as a tackle. He can really move. Can get downfield. He's huge too. He has all those attributes. Arms are long, all that stuff. So all the athletic stuff that you want Mike McGlinchey to do, he can do really well. He just
and small thing too, seems like a great locker room guy. Every time I see an interview from, like, he seems like a genuinely good character to have in your locker room. So like, and that's, you know, something that fans are never going to like give guys credit for, but that is something. Like, I mean, every time, like, for a team that has had constant losing seasons, you need to bring in these culture builders. And I think, you know, we can complain about the play that Mike McGlinchey has had, but from what I've seen, he's been a great person to have in that locker room. So sorry, that was my last little.
No, that was a great point. Great point. Next player, second biggest signing the Broncos made was Zach Allen. And this is a player that, you know, we ripped on Vance Joseph earlier for not knowing his talent evaluation. This one ended up doing okay. I thought he evolved like Vance Joseph, struggling at the beginning of the season, and then towards the middle part, he really took off and he was good for the rest of the year. Zach Allen was solid, man. I was very impressed by him. For how big of a Draymond Jones fan I was, Zach Allen probably is the better player. I'm willing to admit that. I think he brings some of the stuff that I don't think he's as like versatile pass rush guy as Draymond Jones, but he's as good of a pass rusher as Draymond Jones, and I think he's a much better run defender than Draymond Jones. So I'm giving Zach Allen that, and I'm excited for him in the future. I think Zach Allen's going to be a really solid football player for the Denver Broncos well past this next season, honestly. Good signing, Vance Joseph. Good signing, Broncos, everybody involved. What do you think of Zach Allen, Frankie?
A+. Like, I am shocked at how good he is. He is truly, like, I think before the year I was sitting, I was like, oh man, like this team truly needs like a guy on the interior. Like they need a guy. They need truly that one guy. I think Zach Allen can be that guy. Like they need to get some better pieces on the interior around him, I think. But I think Zach Allen, like his numbers this year are phenomenal. And he improved week to week. I've commented on it a lot. Every single game, it felt like there would be like a 3 to 5 play stretch where he would just go Super Saiyan. Like he would shut down a run, shut down another run, get a pressure, drive's done. That's it. Like he was so good at both sides of playing the defensive line where, you know, Draymond Jones was a great pass rusher, and I'd say he was adequate in the run game, where Zach Allen has truly been above average in both roles. I have to completely eat crow. And again, this is a player that's younger than Draymond Jones. This is a player they're able to pay less than Draymond Jones. This is a resounding win for the Denver Broncos. I'm so confident in my feelings about Zach Allen. Like when we talk about how they're going to maneuver contracts this offseason, you know, how they're going to handle the money, I would have no issue restructuring Zach Allen and pushing him down the line because you're that confident he's going to be here for the next 3 years. I truly think he's that level of player. He's been excellent. He's 25. Like he's a centerpiece in what Vance better. That's right. Like, and we've truly seen him get better every year. He was a 35 pressure guy last year, at least what PFF has. He had 60 pressures this year. One of the few D linemen to do that. Like, I could go on and on. I had a lot of words about Zach Allen not being as good as he is, and I was very wrong. So we went on the tangent about how I'm a good evaluator. That was a spot I missed on because I did not see the capabilities he had to truly be that ace in the middle of your interior. I saw him last year kind of working as more of an auxiliary piece to what J.J. Watt was doing. No, like Zach Allen is a dude. He showed it time and time again this year. Couldn't have been more like happy with how that signing turned out, honestly. I think that probably has to be like probably something you have to give Vance Joseph. Like when we're grading Vance Joseph, you probably got to give him a little bit like shit. Like that's literally Vance's guy who he has hand developed like 1,000 flowers to Vance there. Because he's been excellent.
Zach Allen's been awesome. I couldn't ask for anything more. And this is I just went on that whole thing about how when you go into free agency, you're going to overpay. Zach Allen is one of those dudes where I think you nailed it on his evaluation and how much you paid him. And it sounds just like all the other 32 teams that maybe wanted him missed.
Yeah.
Like they undervalued him because Zach Allen is living up to his contract. Let's move on to the rookie class, though. Again, I'm going to do 2. We already touched on Riley Moss, so I'm not going to go in on him, but let's start off with Marvin Mims. Drafted in the second round, 63rd pick of the draft. What would you make of Marvin Mims, and then kind of project him to next year for me as well, Frankie? Yeah. What do you think of him?
Let me give a little pre-note for this before we dive into the rookie class. These are rookies. These guys are not, their stories are not written yet. What our grades are on these guys don't matter because they might develop a lot over the next couple of years and completely turn around. So my initial thoughts on whoever we talk about here, they don't encapsulate what these guys' careers are going to be. This was their first year in a team that is kind of in a lot of kind of a maneuvering state. Their stories are not written yet. I don't want to make it sound like our grades on these guys are like, he's a bust, he's a hit. That doesn't exist yet. It's literally been 9 months since these guys got drafted or whatever. It's too early to tell. So just wanted to say that. But Marvin Mims is really tough for me to evaluate his rookie season. That might sound dumb to a lot of people because I like Pro Bowl punt returner. They got an incredible special teams piece. One of the best returners in the league right now. It seems like probably a top 5 guy. Whatever. This is going to sound like I'm completely ignoring that, but all of that aside, let's evaluate, I'd say, the second round pick receiver that he is as well. And tell me if I'm maybe a little wrong. And again, this isn't all his fault. This was a lot of kind of him being brought into the offense slowly. Is it fair to maybe be a little underwhelmed with Marvin Mims' rookie season as a receiver?
I would say yes. I have a rebuttal, though. I'm going to let you get through this, and I have a rebuttal.
Yeah. I'm not saying, like, I think there's a lot of people that are going to look at the Marvin Mims hit and be like, that's a resounding success for the Broncos. And I'm not saying it isn't. Getting good special teams players is important. But I think when we've seen so many receivers come into the league, especially when they're top 2 round picks, and be the immediate difference makers that we've seen in the last 5 years, to see Marvin Mims' season, I'd say come down to what he probably had 300 receiving yards. That might even be a little high, 400 receiving yards.
I think it was like 360 if I'm not mistaken, but I'm going to look it up real quick.
It's a little hard for me to be like emphatic with what he was as a draft pick. And that's not me. Again, that is not me trying to take away from what Marvin Mims is. He was an incredible special teamer. He had a role on this offense as kind of the coverage dictator. He took the top off a lot of defenses. He was able to tried to be utilized as kind of their gadget guy. And while I think that that's good, I guess I did come away maybe from his rookie season wishing they got a little bit more out of the first Sean Payton receiver that they took with a pick they traded up for, right? Did they trade up for Marvin Mims?
Traded up for Marvin.
Trade up for Marvin Mims in the second round. Like that's a valuable asset, you know, like that is, I think, something they trade up twice. So that I guess is a little bit like when I've been looking back on like what I really think of this rookie class. Again, I think Marvin Mims is a really good player. Am I willing to be like, oh man, that's is that an A+ pick for me yet? I don't think it is. God, I think it's definitely like a BB+, but I don't know. Where are you?
I first want to give you credit as an evaluator again because I just had a flashback to our oh my God. This hurts. I just had a flashback to our do you remember our pre-draft podcast with Zach? We went live right after our after day 2, and we went after evaluated all the picks. I remember a statement you made very clearly. Oh my God, I'm forgetting the guy's name. What's the Texans wide receiver?
Tank Dell.
Oh, yeah. Frankie was very big on why did you trade up when you could have had Tank Dell? And that looks like a solid take right now. I do want to throw you that bone because, like I said earlier, people aren't gonna bring up the highlights, but that is a take Frankie had, and you could pull up that podcast to see that. Yeah,
I don't want to throw more shade on it too. 6th round pick for the Chargers, I believe. Darius Davis, I believe, like statistically was a better returner than Marvin Mims as well. So
yeah.
Sorry, don't want to throw complete one. But yes, you are. There were a couple of those this year. Same with the Riley Moss, where I was like, there's some good corners still on the board.
Yeah, you did say that. I remember that. The pushback that I will give you. So Marvin Mims wasn't asked a ton to do other things than be deep threat and gadget guy. And when I'm evaluating so the difference between that and the other wide receivers is the other wide receivers, Brandon Johnson, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, did get asked to do more, but where all of their strengths were, why we're talking about Jerry Jeudy as not having a great year was because he wasn't winning down the field. Why we're talking about Cortland Sutton's having a great year is because he was winning down the field. So how much of this, like if I had Teddy Bridgewater from the Broncos era at quarterback, would Marvin Mims have a better year? Would he have been asked to do more? Or were we just playing in to Russell Wilson's strengths a little bit with that pick? I wonder. That's just a question I have, because when I'm sitting there thinking about all these other guys, like Brandon Johnson didn't make any noise until Jarrett Stidham came in, really. His last game. Like these are things, and winning over the middle of the field. He was a slant guy the whole year, 2-step drop slant. But other than that, he really made his noise this last game. It feels like the receiving corps as a whole, the way that we have evaluated them with Russell Wilson at quarterback was, are you winning down the field or were you not? Like it really does.
No, it really does. I just, last little point, and again, this is going to really sound like I just think Marvin Mims sucks shit, but I do not at all. I think Marvin Mims is going to be and I really believe in him going forward too. I guess we'll get to that point in a sec. But I guess just to kind of fully encapsulate my point, at the end of the year, Marvin Mims, of all rookies that played snaps, ended 15th in total receiving yards, which just kind of really I'm pretty sure, what was he, the 5th, 6th receiver taken, 7th? Yeah. It's one of those things where I'm just ooh, I'm not trying to make it so what we'll do this. What would be your grade for the Marvin Mims pick?
Right now I'm going C+.
You're actually low. I was going to go B-.
Okay. I'm going to go C+, a lot like Vance. I think he's shown good things this year. I'm just TBD is what I want to see. I'm interested to see Marvin Mims evolve into a route runner. That's something that we need to see him do. Coming out of Oklahoma, a big knock on him was that he didn't have a great route tree. And I think that's kind of what we saw this first year. And you know what? He has the ability to separate. I don't really doubt that with Marvin Mims. He has all the tools to separate. It's just further development. So I'm hoping he can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we'll go with the defense real quick. What did you make of Drew Sanders this year before we sign off?
We talked about it a lot. I'd say another kind of year I think we expected. I think we both evaluated Drew Sanders last year, was a guy that was going to need to put on the NFL peanut butter as soon as he got to the next level, a guy that coming out had tackling issues. I think that was kind of something that didn't get talked enough coming into the year. This was a player that throughout his career at both Alabama and Arkansas, he tackled high on guys and he didn't wrap guys up and fully finish tackles. That was just kind of his MO. That is something that didn't really change a lot this year, but it is something that I think can get better, especially when you talk about him getting to play with guys like Alex Singleton and Josie Jewell, who are really good tacklers. That I don't know. I'd say it was, again, pretty much a year I'd expected. Looking back again, it's one of those things where it's you don't necessarily love it, but you kind of see the fit going forward. I think he was another piece where it's so fun. Dude, I
hated the edge stuff again. I want to reiterate that.
I don't hate giving him looks.
Until a guy masters a position or gets good at a position, don't throw him all around, Van.
Here's what gets me.
I hate that.
Because I was okay. Because I felt that was kind of, I think, what I expected, I guess, a little bit coming in. Here's what gets me. It felt like instead of them being let's try him at different spots, it felt like Vance kind of said, we don't have a fourth edge we trust right now. We have Barron, Benito, Cooper, and Ronnie Perkins. And he was just all right, I'm just going to put Drew Sanders there, which is man, that's not you're not putting him there because you want to develop him there. You're literally just we need another body there. Let's just throw Drew Sanders at outside linebacker. Because again, it wasn't a thing where they were moving him around. He truly got it felt stuck at edge for the final 5 weeks of the season, which was just, again, kind of weird. It just didn't.
Better than Ronnie Perkins.
Like, it's kind of like they were both just kind of there. Like, Drew Sanders, I will say,
Ronnie Perkins got out of position too much for me. That drove me insane about Ronnie Perkins. Drew tried to stay in position. He just got pushed around a lot.
I'm sorry. This is a complete side note. The Bucks are up 40 points on the Celtics.
Oh shoot. Okay, that's it. That's Frankie's
just random little like that just popped up on my phone and I had to like reread it 3 times to be like, what? So yeah, I guess that's happening. Go Bucks. I'm scared you're gonna get slapped in the second round of any playoff series, but go Bucks. But moving, I don't remember right. But yeah, Drew's like
I just hate the edge stuff. That's all, dude. I hate it.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't like it for him. I don't like it for the development. And that's kind of my thing with Isaiah Simmons and Zaven Collins coming out is like, okay, where exactly am I playing these guys? It's confusing. Have they mastered a position, or are they just okay at certain aspects of other positions?
Yeah.
And I don't like Drew Sanders being thrown in with those guys. I personally feel that you should try to get good at one position before you try to move them to another position.
Yeah.
It's just too much to worry about. Like the reason why tight ends usually take so long to develop in the league is because they're asked to block and catch, 2 completely different types of skill sets.
You don't want your linebacker learning how to pass rush while also learning how to fucking properly diagnose passing concepts
Vance
and learn how to
is actively making
running lanes.
Exactly. Vance Joseph is actively making his draft picks tight ends.
And he's a core special teamer. Like that, I guess, is a thing that should be noted. Like all of these rookies, Riley Moss included, they have a ton on their plate. Like these are true, they play every role on special teams and they play it at a high level. I'd say for all 3 guys. And I mean, yeah, like they're trusted to do diverse things on both sides of the ball.
Yeah. It's been a weird season for Drew Sanders. I hope he bulks up this offseason, gets stronger. Not necessarily bulks up like I need a ton more weight on him. I just need him to get stronger.
I need a ton more weight on him. I would love just 15 more pounds on that sucker and let's see what happens.
I like it. I'm not mad at that either. But yeah, guys,
please Quinn got to hang out all off season.
True.
Bulk it up. Oh my, sorry. Last thing, the Raiders announcer who kept going on about Quinn Miners calling him the gut dude. Were you listening to that?
Dude, that guy liked everybody though.
I was losing my mind listening to this dude. I'm like, first of all, he's the belly. That's what kept frustrating. I'm telling my girlfriend, I'm like, he's not even the gut. Who calls him the gut? He's the belly.
Who was the Raiders wide receiver that kept beating us from Cincinnati? It was
Trey Tucker. Trey Tucker.
He likes that guy, that announcer, Frankie. He liked everybody. It was that guy makes a tackle. And you know what, Jim? I really like that guy. It was on every single player that made a play in the game.
That's old buddy. That's buddy getting home from the bar.
I'm over the moon about that guy right there. He's great. Fantastic football player. He was all over the place. He loved everyone. Every single player on the field was first team All-Pro in that man's eyes.
That's what I'm saying. He called Quinn, like, I love Quinn Miners. He was like, this is the best guard in football. I was like, holy shit, what? Like, I like Quinn, but like best guard in football, ooh, like that's a take.
I started noting about the Trey Tucker catch because after like his second catch, and he said he liked Trey Tucker literally after every single catch he made. But after the second one, I really like this guy. I'm like, let me look up this fucker's stats. What has Trey Tucker been doing this year? Like, if I've been missing out, and the next thing you know, I'm like, all right, 331 yards. Like, he's been okay.
Hey, that's 40 less than
how many of those 331s were? He had 79 of those in that last game against the Broncos.
That's actually crazy.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was hilarious. But guys, please follow Frankie Abbott at Frankie.
Follow Joey.
That's fantastic.
He's gonna be in Mobile, guys. Watch Joey at the Senior Bowl. He's gonna get to interview so many cool ass people and like see so many cool things happening. This is me. I was gonna say this is what I was saying. I love this guy. Who's this? Oh, he's great. That's what the announcer is. Yeah.
That's me after a 9 noons in a party on PS5 for sure. Yes, sir. Shout out to Colton Cooper. Shout out to Colton all day long. That's the dude. But yeah, I am going to Mobile. end of this month. It's going to be super fun. Please follow my work. I'm going to be bringing all of it to Let's Talk Broncos. Frankie and I will have some shows. Zach Bree and I will have some shows. It'll be super fun. But until next time, guys, go Broncos.